this, put a stop to it before the situation spiraled out of control. And there was only one way to do it. The wind rattled the leaves of the trees, the cold bite of it slicing through his coat and the layers beneath. It was a long walk to the old farm. He was glad he'd brought the walking stick. He'd brought the lantern, too, but he didn't need it. The 3/4 moon provided more than enough light for him to follow the old 2-track. At the turn in the road, he traversed the ditch and crossed to the barbed wire fence. Hanging his cane on the top strand, he tested its strength, stepped onto the lowest wire, and swung his leg over the top. His knees protested when he came down on the other side. His feet followed suit. Such was the lot of a man who'd lived beyond his time. He walked another 2 minutes before the silhouette of the ramshackle barn and the windmill loomed in the distance. The steel blades spun, whining like a banshee, the vane shifting with a gust. Normally, he loved the sound. Tonight, the screech of steel against steel sent a shiver to his bones, in a way that had nothing to do with the cold.
"Hello?"
he called out.
"Is anyone there?"
The only reply came from the squeak of the turbine, the rattle of wood siding come loose, the clang of the vane shifting in the wind. Feet reminding him that he'd just traversed 2 miles, he waded through the grass to the base of the tower. Grunting, he propped the walking stick against the wood rail fence and sat down on the crumbling concrete base of the windmill tower. Cold, his joints aching, he pulled his coat more tightly about his shoulders, shoved his hands into his pockets, and settled in for a wait. He'd give his midnight caller 10 minutes to make his appearance, another 2 to state his case and declare his intent. If no one showed, he'd walk home and throw away the notes. He'd forget about the silly messages, the way he'd forgotten so many other things over the years. He was wishing for the gloves he'd left on the kitchen table back at the house, the tobacco pipe he kept tucked into his pocket, when the voice came at him from the dark. "I didn't think you'd come." He jolted, hefted himself to his feet, squinted into the dark recesses of the barn. He didn't need to see a face to know who it was. The thunderbolt of recognition slayed him as thoroughly as any sickle, and cut him to his soul, what was left of it.
"My bones are too old for a walk this far,"
he said, his voice calm, despite the riot of emotions coursing through him.
"Especially at a time when an old man should be home in his bed, sleeping."
"And how is it that you sleep?"
"He grants sleep to those he loves,"
he replied, quoting a psalm from the Bible he knew so well.
"God loves all of his children, after all."
A figure emerged from the shadows. The sense of betrayal punched him, hard enough to take his breath, with enough force to make his legs go weak. Never in 100 years would he have imagined this. Not this.
"You know nothing of God,"
the figure said.
"Only lies."
For the first time, he noticed the rifle. His midnight caller held it muzzle down, unthreatening, the way a hunter might carry his weapon when he's tired and on his way home after a long day of hunting. Even so, his heart rolled and began to pound.
"What is it you want?"
he asked. Bitterness suffused the laugh that followed.
"I want you to be gone."
A dozen thoughts battered his brain at once. The realization that he was in danger, a rush of incredulity, like ice water splashed on an exposed nerve, a tine against a broken bone. The rifle came up and was leveled at him. Finger inside the guard, the quiver of the muzzle nearly imperceptible.
"I fear for your soul,"
he whispered.
"And I for yours. What's left of it. We both know you'll not make it to heaven."
The lantern slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground. The globe shattered, but he barely noticed. Breathing heavily, he raised his hands, stepped back.
"Don't sacrifice your life for mine.